Baby found Mother Bear collapsed in hospital parking lot. What this child did was heartbreaking. The night air moved like a gentle hand across the hospital parking lot, carrying with it the soft scent of pine trees and the distant hum of late evening traffic that seemed to whisper rather than roar. Lily Morgan stepped out through the glass doors, her small hand tucked safely in her father Jacob Bennett's warm palm, and she noticed how the parking lot lights created pools of golden warmth against the dark asphalt. The world felt different at this hour, slower somehow, as if everything had decided to take a deep breath and rest for a while. Jacob had finished his late shift as a maintenance supervisor, and they walked toward their old blue truck parked near the back of the lot where the lights grew softer and the shadows stretched longer. Lily liked this time of night because it felt like the whole world was getting ready for sleep, and she often hummed quietly to herself as they made their way home. Tonight was no different, except for the strange feeling that something was waiting for them in the gentle darkness. As they approached their truck, Lily's humming stopped. There, near the far curb where the parking lot met a small patch of grass, lay a large dark shape that didn't belong to the usual collection of cars and trucks. The shape was breathing, rising and falling in a steady rhythm that reminded Lily of the way her grandmother's chest moved when she napped in her favorite chair by the window. "Papa," Lily whispered, tugging gently on Jacob's hand. "Look over there." Jacob followed his daughter's gaze and felt his breath catch in his throat. A mother bear lay on her side near the curb, not moving except for that steady breathing that suggested deep exhaustion rather than injury. The bear's dark fur caught the parking lot lights in a way that made her look almost peaceful, as if she had simply chosen this spot for a much-needed rest. "Stay right here, sweetheart," Jacob said softly, his voice carrying that special tone he used when something required extra care and attention. He reached for his phone and dialed the hospital's front desk, speaking in low, calm tones to explain the situation. Within minutes, Nurse Haley Dawson appeared through the glass doors, her white sneakers making barely a sound on the asphalt as she approached. Haley had worked the night shift for 7 years, and she had seen many unusual things during those quiet hours when the world seemed to hold its breath. But a bear resting peacefully in the hospital parking lot was something entirely new. "She's not moving much," Jacob explained as Haley joined them at a safe distance from the bear. "Just breathing real steady, like she's sleeping hard." Haley nodded, her trained eyes taking in the scene with professional calm. The bear looked to be a medium-sized black bear, probably a mother based on her build, and she showed no signs of distress or aggression. Her breathing was indeed steady and deep, suggesting exhaustion rather than illness or injury. "I've called animal control," Haley said quietly, "but they won't be here for at least an hour. Dr. Adams is on call tonight, and he has some experience with wildlife situations. Let me get him out here." As they waited, Lily found herself drawn to something she noticed in the bear's fur. Caught near the bear's left ear was a thin piece of blue fabric, almost like a bracelet or a small strip of cloth. It looked familiar somehow, and as Lily squinted in the soft light, she realized it was the same shade of blue as the patient identification bracelets used in the hospital. "Papa," she whispered, pointing carefully toward the bear. "She has something blue in her fur." Jacob looked where his daughter was pointing and saw it too. The small piece of blue fabric fluttered gently in the night breeze, and it did indeed look like it could have come from inside the hospital. This added another layer of mystery to an already unusual situation. Dr. Connor Adams emerged from the hospital a few minutes later, carrying a small medical bag and moving with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to unusual situations. Connor had grown up in rural Montana and had helped with wildlife rescues before becoming a physician. He approached the group with calm, measured steps. "Has she moved at all?" Connor asked, setting his bag down at a safe distance from the bear. "Just breathing," Jacob replied. "Real steady and deep, like she's been traveling for a long time and finally found a place to rest." Connor nodded, studying the bear's position and breathing pattern. The bear lay on her side with her legs tucked slightly under her, a position that suggested comfort rather than distress. Her ears occasionally twitched at sounds, indicating that she was aware of their presence but not alarmed by it. "She's not unconscious," Connor observed. "This looks more like exhaustion. Black bears can travel many miles when they're looking for food or a safe place, especially mothers with cubs." At the mention of cubs, everyone's attention sharpened. They looked carefully around the area but saw no sign of any baby bears. The mother appeared to be alone, which added another element of concern to the situation. Michael Hayes, the hospital's security supervisor, arrived with a small collection of orange traffic cones and some yellow caution tape. Michael had worked as security for 15 years and had developed a reputation for handling unusual situations with calm efficiency. He began setting up a perimeter around the bear, creating a safe space that would keep both the bear and any curious onlookers at an appropriate distance. "I've seen a lot of things in this parking lot," Michael said as he positioned the cones, "but this is definitely a first." As the small group maintained their respectful distance, Lily noticed something else that made her heart skip a little. Near the curb, just a few feet from where the bear lay, someone had drawn a chalk outline on the concrete. It was faded and barely visible in the parking lot lights, but it looked like the shape of a paw print. A large paw print that seemed to match the size of the bear's feet. "Papa," Lily whispered, tugging on Jacob's sleeve, "look at the ground near her." Jacob followed his daughter's gaze and saw the faint chalk outline. It was definitely a paw print, drawn in the same blue chalk that Lily often used for her sidewalk art at home. The coincidence sent a small shiver down Jacob's spine, though he couldn't quite explain why. "Haley," Jacob said softly, "do you know if anyone's been drawing with chalk around here recently?" Haley looked at the faint outline and shook her head. "Not that I know of. The maintenance crew would have washed it away during their regular cleaning, unless it was drawn very recently." The mystery deepened as they continued to watch the bear's steady breathing. The night air remained calm and gentle, carrying with it the soft sounds of the hospital's quiet operations and the distant murmur of the city settling into sleep. The bear seemed completely at peace, as if she had found exactly what she was looking for. Lily felt something stirring in her heart as she watched the peaceful scene. The bear looked so tired, so in need of rest, that Lily wanted to help somehow. She thought about the small blanket she kept in her father's truck for the ride home, a soft blue blanket that her grandmother had made for her years ago. "Papa," she said quietly, "can I get my blanket from the truck?" Not to go near her, just to put it on the ground nearby. She looked so tired. Jacob looked at his daughter's earnest face and felt his heart swell with pride. Even in this unusual situation, Lily's first instinct was to offer comfort and kindness. He nodded slowly, understanding that this gesture came from a place of pure compassion. "We'll get it together," he said, "and we'll place it at a safe distance. Just so she knows that someone cares." They walked quietly to the truck, and Lily retrieved her soft blue blanket. It was well worn and much loved, with tiny stars embroidered along the edges in silver thread. As they returned to the group, Lily held the blanket close to her chest, feeling its familiar warmth and comfort. With Dr. Adams' approval, Jacob helped Lily place the blanket on the ground about 10 feet from the bear, far enough away to be safe, but close enough to be noticed. As soon as the blanket settled on the asphalt, something remarkable happened. The bear's ear twitched, and she lifted her head just slightly, looking directly at the small blue blanket with what appeared to be recognition. "She sees it," Lily whispered, her voice filled with wonder. The bear's eyes, dark and intelligent, seemed to focus on the blanket for a long moment before she lowered her head back to the ground. But something had changed in her posture. She seemed more relaxed, more at peace, as if the simple gesture of kindness had communicated something important to her. As the minutes passed, Lily found herself humming softly, the same tune she always hummed when she was trying to help someone feel better. It was a simple melody, something her mother had sung to her when she was very small, though Lily could barely remember those early days. The tune seemed to float on the night air, mixing with the gentle sounds of the hospital and the distant city. To everyone's amazement, the bear's breathing seemed to slow and deepen even more as Lily's soft humming continued. It was as if the melody was exactly what the bear needed to hear. A lullaby that spoke of safety and care, and the promise that everything would be all right. Dr. Adams watched this interaction with professional interest and personal wonder. In all his years of medical practice and wildlife experience, he had never seen such a peaceful exchange between a wild animal and humans. The bear showed no signs of stress or fear, only a deep exhaustion that seemed to be easing with each passing moment. "It's almost like she knows we're trying to help," Connor said quietly to Haley. "Or like she's been here before," Haley replied, thinking about the blue fabric in the bear's fur and the chalk paw print on the ground. The night continued to unfold with a dreamlike quality that none of them would ever forget. The bear rested peacefully. The small group maintained their caring vigil, and Lily's gentle humming provided a soundtrack of comfort that seemed to wrap around them all like a warm embrace. As they waited for animal control to arrive, more details began to emerge that deepened the mystery. Michael, while checking the security cameras, discovered that the bear had appeared in the parking lot around 9 o'clock, moving slowly and deliberately toward the exact spot where she now lay. The footage showed her pausing at several locations before choosing this particular place, as if she was looking for something specific. "She didn't just wander in here randomly," Michael reported to the group. "She came straight to this spot like she knew exactly where she was going." This revelation added another layer of intrigue to an already extraordinary situation. What could have drawn a wild bear to this specific location in a hospital parking lot? And why did she seem so comfortable with their presence? As the clock approached midnight, the bear stirred slightly, lifting her head to look around at the small group of humans who had gathered to watch over her. Her gaze lingered on each of them, but when her eyes met Lily's, something passed between them that felt almost like recognition. Lily stopped humming and smiled at the bear, the kind of gentle smile she reserved for frightened animals and sad friends. The bear looked at her for a long moment, then made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, before settling her head back down on the asphalt. "She knows you're trying to help," Jacob said softly to his daughter, putting his arm around her small shoulders. "I think she's been looking for us," Lily replied, her voice filled with the kind of certainty that children sometimes possess about things adults can't quite understand. As the night deepened and the bear continued to rest peacefully, the small group found themselves drawn into something larger than any of them had expected. What had started as an unusual situation in a hospital parking lot was becoming a story of connection and care that none of them would ever forget. The mystery of why the bear had come to this place and why she seemed so at peace with their presence remained unsolved. But as Lily continued her gentle vigil, humming softly in the night air, while her blue blanket lay nearby like a small beacon of comfort, everyone present felt that they were part of something special, something that would reveal its deeper meaning in its own time. The bear's steady breathing continued, a rhythm that seemed to match the gentle pulse of the night itself. And as the minutes passed, it became clear that this was not just a story about a tired animal seeking rest. This was a story about the mysterious ways that kindness finds its way through the world, connecting hearts across the boundaries that usually separate different kinds of beings. Chapter 2: Night of Soft Care. The hospital settled into its deepest quiet as midnight passed, and the usual sounds of the night shift became a gentle backdrop to the extraordinary scene unfolding in the parking lot. Lily's humming had evolved into something more than just a tune. It had become a bridge between the human world and the wild heart that lay resting on the asphalt. The melody drifted through the cool air like warm breath in winter, carrying with it a promise that safety could be found in the most unexpected places. Haley found herself drawn closer to the scene, not just as a medical professional responding to an unusual situation, but as someone witnessing something that felt almost sacred. She had seen many moments of healing in her 7 years as a night nurse, but this felt different. The bear's breathing had synchronized with Lily's gentle rhythm, creating a harmony that seemed to speak of deeper connections than anyone could fully understand. "She's responding to the music," Haley whispered to Dr. Adams, who nodded in quiet amazement. The bear's eyes had opened again, not with alarm or confusion, but with what appeared to be peaceful awareness. She watched Lily with those dark, intelligent eyes, occasionally blinking in a slow, deliberate way that suggested contentment rather than distress. It was as if she understood that the small girl's song was meant for her, a lullaby offered freely in the darkness. As the minutes passed, a soft rustling sound came from somewhere near the hospital's service entrance. Michael, ever alert to changes in his environment, turned his attention toward the sound while keeping one eye on the bear. What he saw made him pause and signal quietly to the others. A small cart of clean blankets sat near the service door, part of the night shift's routine supply delivery. But something was moving among the neatly folded linens, something small and dark that seemed to be trying to stay hidden. As they watched, a tiny black nose peeked out from between 2 blue hospital blankets, followed by a pair of small, bright eyes. "There's the cub," Connor said softly, his voice filled with understanding and relief. The baby bear was no bigger than a small dog, with fur so dark it was almost invisible against the navy blue blankets. It had apparently been hiding in the cart, safe and warm among the soft linens, while its mother rested nearby. The discovery explained so much about the mother bear's behavior and her choice of location. Lily's eyes widened with wonder as she watched the tiny cub peek out and then quickly duck back into the safety of the blankets. The baby bear seemed to be playing a game of hide-and-seek, occasionally showing just the tip of its nose or one small ear before disappearing again into the soft folds of fabric. "That's why she came here," Jacob said quietly, understanding dawning in his voice. She was looking for her baby. The mother bear had heard Lily's gentle humming, and now she lifted her head more fully, looking toward the cart where her cub was hiding. She made a soft sound, something between a grunt and a purr, and the baby bear's head popped up immediately. The little one looked toward its mother and then at the small group of humans, showing no fear, only curiosity. "They're not afraid of us," Lily observed, her voice filled with wonder. "It's like they know we want to help." Dr. Adams had been thinking the same thing. In his experience with wildlife, bears were typically very wary of humans, especially mothers with cubs. But this pair seemed different, almost as if they had encountered kind humans before and remembered the experience. As if responding to this thought, the mother bear slowly and carefully got to her feet. She moved with deliberate grace, showing no signs of injury or illness, just the careful movements of someone who had been resting deeply and was now ready to move again. She stood for a moment, testing her balance, and then took a few slow steps toward the cart where her cub waited. The baby bear immediately climbed out of the blankets and ran to its mother, making small chirping sounds that spoke of relief and joy at their reunion. The mother nuzzled her cub gently, checking to make sure the little one was safe and unharmed, while the baby bear pressed close to her side. "They're beautiful," Haley whispered, and everyone nodded in agreement. But as the bears prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. The mother bear turned back toward the small group of humans and looked directly at Lily. She took a few steps closer, still maintaining a respectful distance but clearly trying to communicate something. Lily felt her heart skip as the bear approached. There was something in the animal's eyes that reminded her of the way her grandmother looked at her when she was trying to say something important without words. The bear stopped about 6 feet away and sat down, a gesture that seemed both deliberate and meaningful. "What is she doing?" Jacob asked softly, ready to step protectively in front of his daughter if needed. "I think she's saying thank you," Lily replied, her voice filled with certainty that surprised the adults around her. The bear remained sitting for a long moment, her gaze moving from Lily to each of the other humans who had watched over her during her rest. Then she looked at the blue blanket that still lay on the ground nearby, and something remarkable happened. She reached out with one large paw and gently touched the edge of the blanket, not to take it or disturb it, but simply to acknowledge its presence. Dr. Adams had pulled out his phone and was making quiet calls to arrange for the bear's safe transport back to a more appropriate habitat. But as he spoke with wildlife officials, he found himself distracted by the extraordinary behavior he was witnessing. The mother bear's actions suggested a level of understanding and gratitude that challenged everything he thought he knew about wild animal behavior. "Yes, we have a mother and cub," he said into his phone, "but this is unlike any wildlife situation I've ever encountered. They seem to be communicating with us." As they waited for the wildlife transport team to arrive, more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Haley remembered that about 3 weeks earlier, a small girl had been brought to the emergency room after a fall while hiking with her family. The girl had been crying inconsolably until one of the nurses had given her a blue hospital bracelet to play with, something to focus on while they treated her minor injuries. "The bracelet in the bear's fur," Haley said suddenly. "I think I know where it came from." She explained about the little girl and the blue bracelet, and how the family had mentioned seeing a mother bear with a cub during their hike. The pieces were starting to form a picture that was both mysterious and beautiful. "You think this is the same bear they saw?" Michael asked. "I think this bear has been watching over that hiking trail," Haley replied. "And somehow she ended up with that bracelet. Maybe the little girl dropped it, or maybe—" She trailed off, not quite sure how to finish the thought, but everyone understood what she was suggesting. Somehow, this bear had formed a connection with human visitors to her territory, and that connection had drawn her to the hospital when she needed help. Lily had been listening to this conversation with growing excitement. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small paper crane that she had folded earlier that day during art time at school. It was made from blue, construction paper, the same shade as her blanket and the hospital bracelets. "Can I give this to her?" Lily asked her father. "Like a present to remember us?" Jacob looked at Dr. Adams, who nodded slowly. "As long as we're very careful," Connor said. "Place it near your blanket and let her decide if she wants to approach it." Lily walked slowly and carefully toward her blanket, moving with the kind of deliberate calm that seemed to communicate peaceful intentions. The mother bear watched her approach, but showed no signs of alarm. When Lily reached the blanket, she knelt down and placed the small paper crane right next to it, then backed away to rejoin the group. The mother bear stood up and walked over to investigate the new offering. She sniffed the paper crane carefully, then looked back at Lily with what appeared to be understanding. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to several eyes, she gently picked up the crane in her mouth and carried it back to where her cub waited. The baby bear sniffed the crane with great interest, and the mother set it down carefully between her paws. Both bears examined the small paper gift as if it were something precious, and then the mother looked back at Lily and made that soft sound again, the one that sounded so much like gratitude. "She's keeping it," Lily whispered, her voice filled with wonder and joy. As the night continued to unfold, the wildlife transport team arrived with a specially equipped van that would take the bears to a protected area where they could live safely. Savannah Reed, a wildlife specialist who had worked with the local bear population for over a decade, stepped out of the van with a warm smile and a collection of specialized equipment. "I got the call about a mother and cub in a hospital parking lot," Savannah said as she approached the group. "But I have to say, I've never seen anything quite like this." She looked at the peaceful scene, with the bears sitting calmly near the small paper crane and blue blanket, while a little girl hummed softly in the background. The mother bear looked up at Savannah's arrival but showed no signs of stress or fear. "They seem very comfortable with people," Savannah observed. "That's unusual for wild bears, especially a mother with a cub." Dr. Adams filled Savannah in on the evening's events, including the discovery of the hospital bracelet in the bear's fur and the theory about previous encounters with hikers. As she listened, Savannah's expression grew more and more interested. "I think I know this bear," she said finally. "We've been tracking a mother and cub in the area for about 2 months. She's shown up near hiking trails several times, always at a distance, never causing any problems. The hikers have nicknamed her Juniper because she's often seen near the juniper trees along the ridge trail." The name seemed to fit perfectly. Juniper looked like a bear who belonged among the evergreen trees, with her thick, dark fur and calm, intelligent demeanor. When Savannah called her by name, the bear's ears perked up slightly, as if she recognized the sound. "Juniper," Lily repeated softly, and the bear turned to look at her. "That's a pretty name." As Savannah prepared for the bear's transport, she explained that they would be taken to a protected area about 50 miles away, where they could live safely without coming into contact with human development. It was a bittersweet moment for everyone who had been part of this extraordinary encounter. "Will we ever see them again?" Lily asked, her voice carrying a note of sadness at the thought of saying goodbye. "Wild animals belong in the wild," Savannah explained gently. "But sometimes when there's been a connection like this, the memory stays with both the animals and the people. You've given them something special tonight." As the time came for the bears to leave, Juniper stood up and walked once more toward the small group of humans who had watched over her during her time of need. She stopped in front of Lily and sat down again, looking directly into the little girl's eyes. For a moment that seemed to stretch beyond time, the bear and the child looked at each other with perfect understanding. Then Juniper leaned forward slightly and made that soft sound one more time, a sound that everyone present interpreted as a final thank you. Lily smiled and whispered, "You're welcome, Juniper. Take care of your baby." The loading process was gentle and stress-free, with Juniper walking calmly into the transport van while her cub followed close behind. Both bears seemed to understand that this was the next step in their journey, and they showed no resistance to leaving with Savannah. As the van pulled away from the hospital parking lot, Lily waved goodbye until the taillights disappeared into the darkness. The parking lot seemed strangely empty without the bears, but the memory of their presence lingered like a warm glow in the cool night air. "That was something special," Michael said as he began collecting the traffic cones. In 15 years of security work, I've never seen anything like it. Dr. Adams nodded in agreement. There are some things that medical training just doesn't prepare you for, he said. Tonight was one of those things. As the small group began to disperse, each returning to their regular duties or heading home, Lily noticed something that made her heart skip with joy. There, on the asphalt where Juniper had been resting, was a small paw print pressed into a patch of soft dirt that had been tracked in by someone's shoes. It was a perfect impression, as clear and detailed as if it had been made in clay. "Papa, look," she said, pointing to the paw print. "She left us something to remember her by." Jacob knelt down beside his daughter and saw the perfect print. It was indeed a beautiful reminder of their extraordinary encounter, a physical proof that this magical night had really happened. "Should we take a picture?" he asked. "No," Lily said thoughtfully. "Let's leave it here. That way, if she ever comes back, she'll know we remember her." As they finally made their way to their truck, Lily retrieved her blue blanket from where it still lay on the asphalt. The blanket seemed to carry with it the scent of pine trees and wild places, a reminder of the connection that had been formed in this most unlikely of locations. The drive home was quiet, with both father and daughter lost in their own thoughts about the evening's events. But as they pulled into their driveway, Lily spoke up with the kind of insight that sometimes surprises adults. "Papa," she said, "I think Juniper came to the hospital because she knew it was a place where people help each other. And maybe she wanted to show us that animals and people can help each other too." Jacob smiled at his daughter's wisdom. "I think you might be right, sweetheart. And I think tonight we all learned something important about kindness." As they prepared for bed, Lily carefully folded her blue blanket and placed it on her dresser. The blanket would always remind her of the night she met a bear named Juniper, and discovered that sometimes the most beautiful connections happen in the most unexpected places. The hospital parking lot returned to its normal quiet, but the memory of what had happened there continued to ripple outward, touching the lives of everyone who had been part of the extraordinary encounter. And somewhere in the protected wilderness 50 miles away, a mother bear and her cub were settling in for the night, carrying with them a small paper crane and the memory of a little girl's lullaby that had promised them safety in their time of need. The night air continued to move gently through the world, carrying with it the whispered stories of connection and care that bind all living things together in ways that are often mysterious but always meaningful. And in the space between the hospital lights and the wild darkness beyond, the possibility remained that such magical encounters might happen again, whenever kindness calls to kindness across the boundaries that seem to separate us but never really do. The first light of dawn began to touch the edges of the hospital parking lot, painting the asphalt in soft shades of gold and pink that seemed to whisper of new beginnings and gentle revelations. The night had passed like a dream, but the kind of dream that leaves traces in the waking world, evidence that something extraordinary had truly occurred. Dr. Connor Adams arrived early for his morning rounds, drawn back to the place where he had witnessed something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the boundaries between the human world and the wild spaces that existed just beyond the reach of city lights. As Connor knelt on the asphalt where Juniper had rested, he found himself remembering another encounter from years past, a spring morning when he had been part of a wildlife rescue team that had helped an injured bear recover from an encounter with a vehicle. The bear had been a female, medium-sized, with distinctive markings around her ears and a calm temperament that had surprised everyone involved in her care. As the memories crystallized in his mind, Connor realized with growing certainty that the bear from that spring rescue and Juniper were one and the same. "I know you," he said softly to the empty space where she had lain, his voice carrying the weight of recognition and wonder. "You were the bear we helped 3 years ago. The one who looked at us like she understood that we were trying to help." The realization sent ripples of understanding through Connor's mind, connecting dots that had seemed random just hours before. Juniper had been injured in a collision with a car on the mountain highway, and the rescue team had spent 2 weeks nursing her back to health before releasing her into the protected wilderness. During those 2 weeks, she had shown an unusual tolerance for human presence, never displaying the fear or aggression that was typical of wild bears in captivity. When Lily and Jacob arrived at the hospital later that morning, they found Connor still kneeling by the spot where Juniper had rested, his medical bag beside him and his expression thoughtful. Lily had insisted on returning to the parking lot before school, drawn by a feeling she couldn't quite explain but trusted completely. She carried with her a small notebook where she had drawn pictures of the previous night's encounter, wanting to capture every detail before the memory began to fade. "Dr. Adams," Lily had called softly as they approached. "Did you find something?" Connor looked up with a smile that seemed to carry secrets and revelations. "I found a memory, Lily. I think I've met Juniper before. A long time ago when she needed help just like she did last night." As Connor shared his recollections of the spring rescue, Lily listened with growing excitement. The story he told painted a picture of a bear who had learned to trust certain humans, who had experienced kindness and care during a vulnerable time, and had somehow retained that memory through the years that followed. So she remembered that people could be kind, Lily said, her voice filled with understanding. And when she needed help again, she came looking for the kind of place where kind people would be. The wisdom in her words struck Connor with the force of a revelation. Hospitals were indeed places where kindness lived, where the primary purpose was to help and heal and care for those in need. It made perfect sense that a bear who had experienced human compassion would seek out such a place when she found herself in need of assistance. Haley joined them in the parking lot, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the slightly tired but satisfied expression of someone finishing a long night shift. She had spent the remaining hours of her shift thinking about the encounter with Juniper, trying to piece together the various elements that had made the experience so extraordinary. "I've been thinking about that bracelet we found in her fur," Haley said as she approached the group. "And I remembered something else about that little girl who came in 3 weeks ago." She went on to explain that the family had mentioned their hiking experience in more detail while they waited for the child's X-rays. The little girl had been fascinated by a mother bear and cub they had seen from a distance, and she had insisted on leaving some of her trail snacks near a tree as a gift for the bears. The family had thought it was harmless, a sweet gesture from a child who loved animals. The mother said the little girl had been humming to herself while they hiked, Haley continued, the same tune she always hummed when she was happy. It was a lullaby her grandmother used to sing. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with a clarity that felt almost magical. Lily's humming the night before had been the same type of gentle melody that the hiking child had shared with the bears weeks earlier. Juniper had recognized not just the kindness in the gesture, but the actual musical pattern that had spoken to her of safety and care. She knew the song, Lily whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. That's why she looked at me like that. She remembered the music. As they stood in the morning light, discussing the connections that had brought them all together in such an unlikely place, Lily noticed something that made her heart leap with joy. There, pressed into a small patch of soft earth near the curb, was not just one paw print, but several. Juniper and her cub had left a trail of prints that led from the spot where they had rested to the place where Savannah's van had been parked. But it was what lay beside the prints that truly took Lily's breath away. The small paper crane she had given to Juniper was there, carefully placed next to the clearest of the paw prints, and weighted down with a small stone so it wouldn't blow away in the morning breeze. Beside the crane was something else, something that made Lily's eyes fill with tears of joy and wonder. A single pine cone, perfect and unblemished, had been placed next to the paper crane. It was the kind of pine cone that grew on the juniper trees along the mountain hiking trails, and it had been positioned with the same careful deliberation that Juniper had shown when she touched Lily's blanket with her paw. "She left us a present," Lily said, her voice filled with awe. "She left us something from her home to remember her by." Jacob knelt beside his daughter and saw the small collection of gifts that Juniper had arranged before her departure. The paper crane, the pine cone, and the perfect paw prints created a tableau that spoke of gratitude and connection across the species barrier. It was a message written in the universal language of kindness, one that needed no translation. Dr. Adams pulled out his phone and took a careful photograph of the arrangement, not to disturb it, but to preserve the memory of this extraordinary gesture. As he looked at the image on his screen, he found himself thinking about the countless ways that healing and connection manifest in the world, often in forms that medical textbooks never describe. "In all my years of practice," Connor said softly, "I've learned that healing isn't just about medicine and procedures. Sometimes it's about recognition, about being seen and understood. I think that's what happened here last night." As the morning progressed and the hospital came fully to life around them, more staff members found reasons to visit the parking lot and hear the story of Juniper's visit. Each person who listened seemed to carry away something different from the tale, but all were touched by the evidence of connection and communication that transcended the usual boundaries between human and wild. Michael Hayes arrived for his day shift and was immediately drawn to the spot where the encounter had taken place. As the security supervisor who had witnessed the entire event, he felt a particular connection to the story and its meaning. He had spent his career maintaining order and safety, but the previous night had shown him that sometimes the most profound safety came not from barriers and protocols, but from openness and trust. "I've been thinking about what this means," Michael said as he joined the group around the paw prints and gifts. "About how a wild animal could feel safe enough to rest in a hospital parking lot, surrounded by people and lights and all the things that usually frighten wildlife." His words sparked a conversation about the nature of sanctuary and safety, about the ways that kindness creates spaces where even the most vulnerable can find rest and healing. The hospital parking lot had become, for one night, a place where the wild world and the human world had met in perfect harmony. Savannah Reed called Connor's phone around mid-morning with an update on Juniper and her cub. The transport to the protected area had gone smoothly, and both bears had settled into their new environment with remarkable ease. Juniper had carried the paper crane with her during the entire journey, never letting it out of her sight. "She's keeping it in her den," Savannah reported, her voice filled with wonder. "I've never seen a wild bear show such attachment to a human-made object. It's like she understands that it represents something important." The news filled everyone with a deep sense of satisfaction and completion. Juniper was safe, her cub was thriving, and the connection that had been forged in the hospital parking lot continued to exist even across the miles that now separated them. As Lily prepared to leave for school, she took one last look at the arrangement of gifts and prints that marked the spot where magic had happened. She had learned something profound during the night's encounter, something about the ways that kindness ripples outward through the world, creating connections that transcend the boundaries that seem to separate different kinds of beings. "Papa," she said as they walked toward their truck, "do you think we'll ever see Juniper again?" Jacob considered the question carefully. understanding that his answer would become part of how his daughter remembered and understood this extraordinary experience. "I think," he said finally, "that once you've shared kindness with someone, they're always with you in a way. Even if we never see Juniper again, we'll always have the memory of the night she trusted us enough to rest in our care." The wisdom in his words resonated with Lily, who nodded thoughtfully as they drove away from the hospital. She understood that some encounters are meant to be brief but profound, leaving lasting impressions that continue to influence how we see the world and our place in it. Throughout the day, the story of Juniper's visit spread through the hospital community and beyond. Nurses shared it during shift changes, doctors discussed it during rounds, and visitors heard whispered versions in waiting rooms and corridors. Each telling added new layers of meaning and interpretation, but the core message remained consistent. Sometimes the most profound healing happens when we open our hearts to unexpected connections. The afternoon brought a surprise visitor to the hospital parking lot. The family with the little girl who had encountered Juniper on the hiking trail had heard about the previous night's events and had come to see the place where their own brief connection with the bears had led to something so much larger. "We never imagined that leaving those snacks for the bears would lead to something like this," the mother said as she looked at the paw prints and gifts that Juniper had left behind. "Our daughter has been talking about that bear family ever since our hike. She said she felt like they were trying to communicate with her." The little girl, whose name was Emma, knelt beside Lily's paper crane and pine cone with the same reverence that others might show in a sacred space. She was about Lily's age, with the same kind of open-hearted curiosity that had allowed both children to connect with Juniper in their own ways. "I dreamed about the mama bear last night," Emma said softly. "In my dream, she was singing the same song I was humming on the trail." "Do you think she really remembered me?" The question hung in the air like a prayer, and everyone present felt the truth of it in their hearts. Of course, Juniper had remembered. The capacity for memory and connection that the bears had demonstrated went far beyond what most people believed possible, but the evidence was undeniable. As the day wore on and evening approached, the hospital parking lot gradually returned to its normal rhythm of activity. Cars came and went, staff members hurried between shifts, and visitors made their way to and from the building that represented hope and healing for so many. But the spot where Juniper had rested remained somehow different, marked not just by the physical evidence of her presence, but by the lingering sense that something sacred had occurred there. Dr. Adams made a point of walking through the parking lot at the end of his shift, drawn once again to the place where his understanding of healing and connection had been expanded in ways he was still processing. As he stood in the gathering dusk, he found himself thinking about the countless patients he had treated over the years, and how many of them had taught him that medicine was about much more than procedures and prescriptions. "Every patient has something to teach us," he said softly to himself, "but last night my teacher happened to be a bear." The thought brought a smile to his face as he made his way to his car. Tomorrow would bring new patients, new challenges, and new opportunities to practice the kind of compassionate care that had made Juniper feel safe enough to rest in their midst. The encounter had reminded him why he had chosen medicine in the first place, and had renewed his commitment to seeing each patient as a whole being deserving of not just medical treatment, but genuine care and respect. As night fell once again over the hospital, the parking lot settled into its familiar quiet rhythm. The security lights cast their gentle glow over the asphalt, and the sounds of the city created their usual backdrop of distant activity. But for those who knew what to look for, the evidence of magic remained. The paw prints pressed into the soft earth, the paper crane and pine cone arranged with deliberate care, and the lingering sense that the boundaries between the human world and the wild world were far more permeable than most people ever imagined. The story of Juniper's visit would continue to ripple outward through the community, inspiring conversations about kindness, connection, and the ways that healing manifests in the world. Children would draw pictures of bears in hospital parking lots. Adults would find themselves humming lullabies to frightened animals, and everyone who heard the tale would carry away their own understanding of what it meant. But perhaps the most important legacy of that extraordinary night was the simple reminder that kindness, once offered freely and without expectation, creates connections that transcend all boundaries and continue to influence the world in ways both seen and unseen, both immediate and eternal. Morning light painted the hospital parking lot in shades of hope and possibility, and somewhere in the protected wilderness 50 miles away, a mother bear named Juniper was teaching her cub about the mysterious ways that kindness moves through the world, connecting all living things in an endless web of care and compassion. The paper crane rested safely in their den, a small blue reminder that love speaks all languages and crosses all boundaries, and that sometimes the most profound healing happens when we simply choose to see each other as fellow travelers on the same journey toward understanding and peace. As the new day began, the parking lot resumed its normal function as a place of transition and purpose, where people came and went in pursuit of healing and hope. But it would always be, for those who had witnessed Juniper's visit, a place where the impossible had become possible, where a wild heart had found sanctuary among strangers, and where the simple act of offering comfort to another being had created a story that would be told and retold for generations to come. The mystery of how a bear had known to seek help at a hospital, and how a small girl's lullaby had provided exactly the comfort that was needed, would never be fully explained. But perhaps that was as it should be. Some stories are meant to remain mysteries, their power lying not in their explanation but in their ability to remind us that the world is far more connected and compassionate than we often dare to believe. The final image that lingered in the morning air was one of perfect simplicity: a paper crane and a pine cone, side by side on the asphalt, representing the gifts that flow between species when fear is replaced by trust and suspicion is replaced by love. It was a small tableau that spoke of large truths, a quiet testament to the fact that healing and connection are always possible, even in the most unlikely of places, even between the most unlikely of friends. The hospital continued its eternal mission of healing and hope, and the wild world continued its ancient dance of survival and adaptation. But for one magical night, those two worlds had touched and recognized each other, creating a story that would remind everyone who heard it that kindness is the universal language, and that sometimes the most profound healing happens when we simply choose to care for each other across all the boundaries that seem to divide us but never really do. In the end, the story of Juniper's visit was not really about a bear in a hospital parking lot. It was about the ways that love moves through the world, creating connections and possibilities that transform everyone they touch. It was about the courage to offer comfort to a stranger, the wisdom to recognize need when we see it, and the faith to believe that kindness, once offered, will find its way to exactly where it needs to go. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the asphalt where paw prints were pressed into the earth, and where a small paper crane waited patiently beside a pine cone, both serving as quiet reminders that the most beautiful stories are often the ones that begin with a simple choice to care, and that end with the understanding that we are all connected in ways far more profound and beautiful than we ever dared to imagine.